Hi there, it's James Miller for VFX Nomad, and here we're going to talk about render settings. So Dylan was mentioning in one of the comments that he was having a hard time tracking down any information about how to get better render settings or get rid of noise. So I thought we would cover it here. Now I'm just going to wing this a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that we're set to 100% on our resolution, and we're going to try and pick some, the bigger the better. And we also want to have a starting point if we can. So one of the things that I find very helpful when I'm doing things like this is called image history. And I've been working on this for a while, so I have a bunch of them already, but yours will likely be blank. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because when this image finishes calculating, it'll appear here, but it will also tell me how long it took to create it. So if I pull this over, here we go. It says basically that image took 26 seconds. Now, the very first thing that you want to do when you want to get better quality is come over to your path tracer. All right, so this is your ray tracer. This is the engine behind everything in your scene. Now, this is kind of like the big red button. Okay, so this is like nuke it from orbit. You increase this, and this makes everything better. So this is going to divide each of your pixels basically and give a lot more information and a lot more processing, and everything will get better as a result. Now, that's great, but as you might have imagined, there's a certain point that we're going to hit where it's suddenly costing us a lot of time, right, to keep cranking this up. Just to show you what I mean, this is our image at 16. Now let's put it up 64, right? So this number can go really, really big. So like 512 or 1024. So as I understand it, it's not been squared. So you might be used to seeing values like 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And in this case, you're going to go 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. That's just to try and explain what values you could expect to enter into this field here. Now underneath it you have anti-aliasing sample. I normally leave this one alone, to be honest. And then I come over here to anti-aliasing filter Blackman-Harris. That's what I'm on most of the time. And that should automatically switch this to looking basically 3 pixels around in it. The easiest way to think of it is a bit like a blur. It kind of averages out around based on the 3 pixels around it. So it's very gentle in what it's doing, but it is, in fact, sort of grabbing the pixels around it for an average. Now, as you can see, this image is taking a lot longer than 26 seconds to finish. And that's where this comes in useful, because you're not necessarily going to remember how long everything took or what was longer than others. So here we go. We've gone from 26 seconds to almost 2 minutes. So the place to start with all of this is going to be giving ourselves something other than the beauty just to look at. Because looking here is useful. I mean, obviously we can see noise, but it's going to be more useful if we can begin to track down where that noise is specifically coming from. To do that, we just need to go to the AOV editor. Make sure that you're on your image and on your layer, and you have all of these options. Now, if we go down to PBR, wherever that is, there we go. You have diffuse you have diffuse glossy spec. Let's pop these open. Maybe spec glossy. We don't want to have more than we need. And what we're going to do is grab transmission and reflection from both of those, and we will just add that. And then we probably don't need emission. That's an emissive object over here. I don't know, we'll just grab it anyway. All right, and ultimately what has to happen now is it has to calculate all over again. So we know that that's going to take us another 2 minutes. Just for the sake of this, I'm going to turn it down a little bit. In an ideal world, I reckon we probably would have wanted to stay up near that value. It's just I don't want you to have to wait 2 minutes every time I want to talk about something. Which actually leads me to the next thing that we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to let this run for just have a frame of reference. But then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and talk about this, which is the region render. Now, when you turn it on, sorry, I just messed it up. Well, I messed it up, so now I have to talk about it. If you click on this here, on your specific one, if you haven't already done anything, you might find that the whole thing is doing something like that. But then when you're clicking on here and you're moving, none of these things are going to do anything except for maybe select your geometry. The trick here is that you need to hold the key X And when you hold that, it allows you to select a certain part of the frame to render. And the way to turn that off again is to come up here and let everything process. So this is extremely useful when you're trying to come down here and determine what's going wrong. You don't want to wait for this whole frame to go. You're going to press the spacebar, pull this in the middle, click on that light region render area, and you're going to select what it is exactly that you want it to run. Now this image that it gives you as a result, 2 seconds, we know that it's probably just talking about this a little bit down here. Okay, so I let this run out as a test frame like I said I would, and now I'm going to do my best to try and show you the different places that you can go looking for noise. Now the first one is going to be the light itself. The light itself here is just a distant light, and it's got this sample count down here. So this is how many, just to sort of say it from the beginning, normally you don't need a lot of samples in here. You may, if you have an environment light with an image in it, you may find that initial bounce is quite noisy, but the chances are that here you're going to be okay. Now, just to sort of show you where it is, if you have a soft fall off here like we do, right, you may find, so let me just go over here, you may find that there's some noise here in this fall off. Okay, so this is where this is going to sort of come into its own. So I'm going to change this. Well, first off, we don't want to render the whole image, so I'm just going to hold down the X key and highlight here, let that calculate, and then if I change this and I make it something high, it should be smoother. Now we're going to toggle between the two. You can see that this is grainy, and if we toggle back, we'll see that it's smoother. Now I will try and make that full frame because you're going to be watching it on YouTube, so it's about as big as I can get it for the minute. So just keep an eye on here. This is the good one, this is the bad one. So hopefully you can see that. Now if you were to render this out as an image sequence, you'd see all this dancing. So this is a lot better, right? And what we did is we targeted specifically this light, and we were like, you can have some more samples. So that's great. Now the chances are, if I had left this path tracer at a higher value, so let's say 128, we would probably find that we didn't really need to give it these extra samples. But let's just compare. So that's at 128, just looking down here at the bottom, and this is at our original 16, and it is roughly the same. So I don't want to confuse the issue, but what I'm saying here is that this here, if you increase this is going to make everything better, okay? But if it's getting too expensive, what you can do is start to come in and target specific noises. So you can either have this lower and turn these guys up higher, or you feel free to turn these guys back down and turn this guy up higher, which makes everything better. Now, you don't want to come in here and turn everything up, because that's just going to give you a really long render time and probably look exactly the same. So on that note, we will go back to where we were. We're just doing this with these numbers to make it clearer as to what exactly I am trying to do. So I can't remember if that's what we did. Maybe we did 128 over here. Sorry, I should have paid more attention, but there we go. So this one, yep, noisy. This one, clean. All right, so that's this guy here, and we are able to get away with this relatively low value up here. So our render's nice and speedy. If I'd paid more attention, I would have mentioned numbers that are over there, but I didn't. So there we go. The next thing that we want to do, so don't forget that I'm looking at this specifically because it's a little hard to tell because you have this sort of snow over everything. What we're going to do is we're going to go over here. We're going to try and figure out where that is coming from. So it's still rendering. It's going to take a minute. We don't really want to wait around for it, so I'm just going to grab this part here, and we're going to look at this material. So this emissive light is casting light down here. That's what this guy is. And then we have, remember, this distant light that we spoke about at the beginning. So those two things are contributing to this this kind of noisy effect over here. Now to go over exactly the same thing that we said before, you increase this guy, it increases everything, makes this look better. So 128, let it run. Takes a second. looking a lot better. But if you look here in this corner, that's still looking kind of noisy. And if you were to render that out, it would dance around, like I said before. Now, obviously, we can keep cranking this up, or we can try and be more specific. Now, a nice little shortcut, go over here to the dropper, middle click on the material that you're interested in, and it will take you, middle click on the object you're interested in, and it will take you to the material. Now, again, the same as the light. If you look over here, we should be able to find, let me collapse all of this business. We should be able to find the samples. So there we go, material sampling. Now, by default, the material sample count is saying use the render settings. When it says that, it means use what's on the path tracer. So if you come down and you're here, you're going to see that every material in your scene is using 16. That is what the default is. And you can either multiply those, so you can say, actually, you know, all of my reflections are noisy. So here, boost all of my reflections, give them double the samples. You can do it this way, sure, but that does every single material in your scene. Or if you want to be a bit more surgical with it, like I said, middle click on the thing that you're interested in, takes you to that material. You can override them from over here. So here we're going to do the same thing that we just did with the light. We're going to change this to 128. We're going to let it render. Here we've got the same region, so we can see that it was 13 seconds, and now it is going to be longer. But that, in essence, what we've done is cranked up all of the samples for the material, and it was almost the same. So letting this render, and we've increased it to 128, it really doesn't look very different, right? It's basically identical. So at this point, before we sort of give up and say, oh, this isn't the right thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this to quite a high value. I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to give you 512 in terms of samples, and we're going to let it cook for a second. Because hopefully what's happening is the material's basically bouncing these rays between these two edges, and that's actually where our noise is coming from. And if you look, it already looks a lot cleaner. Hopefully that is clear on your screen. Now, if I toggle between it, this was the last one. You can see it's quite grainy. Let me see if I can maximize the real estate over here. I pulled it over so you can see the times. All right, there we go. So that's the newest image, and that's the old image. So as you can see, the noise value is quite different. And that's just from increasing. So we middle clicked with this. It brought us to that particular material. I've overridden this from 16 to 512, and it has given us a much cleaner image, which is over here. And if we look at the time, I mean, it has tripled the time, but the advantage is that now when it's calculating the image, it's only going to give those extra samples to anything with this material on it, as opposed to everything else in the scene, which should give us, help us out a lot. So, I mean, the methodology here is realistically what you would do is you would come in, you would turn that up as high as you can while still getting kind of an acceptable render time. Obviously, you don't need to turn it up to 11 if you're getting an image that's fine. But hopefully what you can do is you can turn this up and you'll be like, hey, I'm getting, 99% of this image is pretty decent. But what's happening is hopefully what we'll see here is maybe like a bit of noise here or a bit of noise in this particular mirror. So then we know we don't need to turn up everything. We just need to actually pay attention and sort of go in and try and modify a certain part of this image. Unfortunately, this thing that I've just increased is on both of these surfaces, so it's going to take a second for it to finish calculating down here. But when it does, I'm going to continue on and we will start looking at another noisy part. All right, so that took a lot longer, obviously, but we have cranked things up, so that's to be expected. Let's go on the hunt for some more noise, shall we? Here we have, well, this is the most obvious bit. So just before I dive into this little corner, I want to recap real quick. There are only 3 real places to look for noise. So the first one is the path tracer. Turn this number up, everything gets better. The second one is your lights. So you come over here, you crank this number up, and your shadows, the soft fall off, will get better. And then your third one is the material itself that you are getting the noise from. So in our case, we had this material twice on 2 walls, and as it was bouncing, as the light was bouncing off this, it was basically coming here and creating noise. So we increase the sample, this cleans up between the two. And all we're going to do is kind of rinse and repeat that. And honestly, we just have a bunch of materials next to each other, so the chances are we just need to find out which materials are causing the noise on what. Like I said, we're just going to look at this part over here. So I'm just going to grab this, I'm just going to press X. Yeah, we're looking for this little edge here. We can see that the white light is quite noisy, right? So the question is it the emissive light that's causing the noise and needs more samples, or this is a mirror here? So it could be the mirror itself actually needs more samples. So again, I'm on the eyedropper. I'm going to middle click on this. It takes us to the dielectric. The dielectric is what is being reflective for us here, and we're just going to jump straight in and go with 256 and see if that actually helps to improve anything or if it stays the same. So hopefully I haven't increased the render time too much. Let it finish calculating, and we're going to toggle between the two. So we see that there is an increase, but it may not be as good as we were hoping for. So before we totally give up on it, I'm going to come over here and go 512 and again give it a moment to think and toggle between the two. So it is improving, but it's not improving as drastically as I would have expected. So I'm just going to wind this back down. I mean, it probably did need more. So 128 is what I will settle on. And if I toggle between 512 and 128, there is a difference, but I'm undecided right this minute. So what we can do is come over to the emissive one, which I think is this. Nope, it's not that one. Here we go, it's this Disney principled one. And what we're going to do is we're going to increase that. So why don't we just go straight in with 512 and see if that helps sort any of the noise out. So it did nothing at all. So that's good to know. It does in fact look like all of that noise is coming from the mirror. So we can take this down, click on the mirror like we had before, and let's make it something really big. So 1024. This will increase the render time, but hopefully between 1024 and our original one, which was down here somewhere, there will be a noticeable difference. I'm hoping. So that was the original noise. So it could still be better, but we're going to have to keep hunting, I think, at this point to try and figure out what exactly is causing that. Let's go and have a look. Sorry, I'm looking for the reference image, which was 85. There we go. So it's not going to be the glass because we know it's over here, and we have tried this mirror, which is over here. So I don't know, we could try increasing the material itself over here because it is bouncing across and then coming back. So let us do that. Go to the most recent image, middle click on this guy, sample 128, see if that makes any difference. Looks kind of the same. All right, and we're going to crank it up high, 1024. Now, having said all of this, there is a point where I was about to say, this is working, so that's great. But I was about to say there is a point where you may find that turning up your material sample count stops really making anything better. And what it might mean is you just have to bite the bullet and come over here and turn up the path tracer a bit. But our noise in this particular case did in fact seem to be coming in part from the mirror, but actually mostly it was coming from this object reflecting against itself in the mirror and then coming back. And it was solved by turning this up to a really high value. So if we toggle between the two, that's what it was as a default, and that is what it is now. The trick at this point is to try and lower it to an acceptable value. So you want to try and keep it fast, but you want to get rid of the noise. So 256, we have our noise back. So let's go up to 512. We'll just keep an eye on it over here. Yeah, I mean 512, we're going to be out here, so you might find that 512 is plenty. But you know, now you know this is how you've deconstructed the image. You now know where that noise is coming from. So obviously 1024 is going to be better, but it might not be worth the additional render time. So there we go. That's where it was. That's what it is now. That is a significant increase. So right now I'm just rinsing and repeating in the image, but if you want to also go one step further and talk about bounces specifically, they're the things that are going to save you a lot of time. Now I'll just show you where they are. I think it might be sort of out of the scope of what I want to cover today, but these are kind of my default settings. They might actually be the default settings now. I'm not totally sure. But the idea is to you have these indirect bounces as low as you can possibly get them. Now, what does that mean? These are the number of bounces that the rays are going to make around your scene before they die. And there are certain things that you've got in here, such as transmission, right? And the transmission is something that pertains to glass. If you guys don't mind, I'm actually going to sort of skip this last render that I said I was going to do, and I'm just going to talk about the glass for just a moment. Now, what's happening is the ray is in essence hitting the glass, and so that's 1, and then it's going through the glass, so that's 2. All right, and we have enough bounces here for that to work, right? So it's going through, coming back, 2. And now we will see this go wrong if we duplicate our glass and push it back. And what you see here is, hold on, I just want to make sure I'm telling you the truth and not going through a wall. Our glass. There's our original one. There's the one I just made, and for good measure I'm going to make one more and push it behind that. Awesome. Come over here, press play. Now what happens here is you see that it can handle one piece of glass or one face. It can handle a second piece of glass or a second face. But what happens is as soon as it hits the third, it runs out of rays, right? It can no longer make it through the scene. So the way around that is that you want to go over here, and I'm just going to guess here that it was the specular transmission. Yeah. So when I do that, it's going all the way through, and then, you know, it's not totally making it all the way back, but it's still working okay. Now we can increase this further. We can go 4, but make sure that you change the maximum to 4, right? So we change everybody, and we're getting a bit more of an image, but in essence, that's what this means, okay? So you only ever want this set to the minimum required to get your array to go through the scene. The reason, well, because it's expensive, we don't just leave all of these things here at really high values because you don't actually need it. So what you want to do is have these as low as possible while still being able to see your image. So in this case, that would be too low because this stuff is going black. But that was just for the demo, so we don't actually need to do it. So I'm going to delete it, and we're going to look through it, and everything's going to be fine. Hopefully, that wasn't too much information, but just to recap, we have the path tracer. This is like the central hub of where everything is happening. If you just want everything to look better, turn this up. And if you want to give it a bit of a nicer edge, you're going to change this from whatever it is, box or whatever at the beginning, to Blackman Harris. It will automatically change here. You don't need to think about it. We can go down. If you want to change all the materials in the scene, you can. If you want to change the global number of bounces, you can. You can use your AOVs to come in here. You can take a look at the light itself, and the fall off in the shadows is going to be where that value comes in, or where those samples are going to help you out. And if we click on the light in this particular scene and we scroll down, we will find them under sampling here. And then what we want to do is, for the rest of it, you're probably going to want to look at the materials and try and figure out which materials are aggravating the renderer, and then give them more samples specifically instead of just giving more samples to everything in your scene. And like we discussed, the easiest way to do that is with the use of the eyedropper. You come over here, you find the thing that looks bad, middle click on it, it will take you to that, and then you can override its material sample count over here And the trick here is to have it just high enough to clean up the noise that you're looking at, but you don't want to waste a bunch of samples going a lot higher than you need to. I hope that helped, and if that wasn't clear, let me know, and I will try and do a better job of explaining it next time.